back. Hello again, everybody. We just came back from a very quick break. My name is Teacher Judith, and I'm still in the middle of Chapter 2 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which is been going quite well so far. Yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying your afternoon, having your lunch soon, hopefully. Taking a nice break in the middle of your week. Okay? Hello, welcome people. Okay, I did stop in the middle of this Harry Potter chapter, so let's continue, I suppose. Okay, so where were we? The last thing we mentioned was here, right? It was about the Dursleys. They're still in the middle of their ride to the zoo. So it's Mr. Dursley driving, Aunt Petunia in the front passenger seat. And in the back we have Dudley, his friend Piers, as well as Harry. Okay? And Harry's just mentioned to them that he had a dream about a flying motorcycle, and they do not like that. Okay, so it was a very sunny Saturday, and the zoo was crowded with families. The Dursleys bought Dudley and Piers large chocolate ice creams at the entrance, and then, because the smiling lady in the van had asked Harry what he wanted before they could hurry him away, they bought him a cheap lemon ice pop. It wasn't bad either, Harry thought, licking it as they watched a gorilla scratching its head who looked remarkably like Dudley, except that it wasn't blonde. So notice that, again, these are constant reminders that Harry and Dudley do not have a good relationship, okay? So Harry is likening Dudley to this gorilla who's scratching its head, except that the gorilla is not blonde, okay? So Harry had the best morning he'd had in a long time. He was careful to walk a little way apart from the Dursleys so that Dudley and Piers, who were starting to get bored with the animals by lunchtime, wouldn't fall back on their favorite hobby of hitting him. They ate in the zoo restaurant, and when Dudley had a tantrum because his Knickerbocker glory didn't have enough ice cream on top, Uncle Vernon bought him another one, and Harry was allowed to finish the first. Okay, so a few things here, okay? They didn't even want to get Harry an ice cream cone. That's it, an ice cream cone. Surely a zoo ticket is more expensive than an ice cream cone, okay? So that kind of puts into perspective, again, how they feel about Harry and how they cannot be bothered to have him there, okay? So they got him a lemon ice pop. Meanwhile, the other two kids, who are Harry's bullies as well, okay, got some nice chocolate and whatever caramel flavored things. Okay, so again, this puts us into perspective. It's very good imagery to use and instances to talk about to really add to the characterization as well as the personification and how they relate to each other generally. Okay. Hello, welcome to the live, everybody. Okay, we're on page... Actually, it's not technically page 33, but it's a couple of pages into chapter 2 of Sorcerer's Stone, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. So I hope you'll stick around and read it with me. Okay. Harry felt, afterward, that he should have known it was all too good to last. After lunch, they went to the reptile house. It was cool and dark in there, with lit windows all along the walls. Behind the glass, all sorts of lizards and snakes were crawling and slithering over bits of wood and stone. Dudley and Piers wanted to see huge poisonous cobras and thick, man-crushing pythons. Dudley quickly found the largest snake in the place. It could have wrapped its body twice around Uncle Vernon's car and crushed it into a trash can. But at the moment, it didn't look in the mood. In fact, it was fast asleep. So notice that Dudley and Piers are only interested in animals who can be violent and vicious in some way. Okay, not interested in anything else. They went to the reptile house with a purpose. They wanted to see some man-eating snakes. Okay, but naturally, do you think there will be man-eating snakes at the zoo? If they would allow all of us scurrying about in the zoo, I don't think so. Okay, but again, they're all about a similar age. Okay, I think in this book they're about 10 to 11 years old. So yeah, so take what you will from that. Okay. Dudley stood with his nose pressed against the glass, staring at the glistening brown coils. Okay. Glistening is another word we use for shining, but in a slightly, you could say, there's some texture to it. Yeah. Okay, you would even use glistening if like the raindrops were glistening or the morning dew is glistening on the leaf, for example. Okay, because it's wet, it's got texture. Okay, make it move, he whined at his father. Uncle Vernon tapped on the glass, but the snake didn't budge. Do it again, Dudley ordered. Uncle Vernon rapped the glass smartly with his knuckles, but the snake just snoozed on. So notice, at first he tapped on the glass. It's more gentle, right? He's just tapping, like. Okay. Then he rapped on the glass, which is a word that they used earlier when Aunt Petunia was demanding Harry to wake up, right? So she rapped. She knocked very fiercely on the glass. So this is what Uncle Vernon is doing now. He knocked. He rapped on the glass. And notice that typically if you go to the zoo or to any of these exhibits or even to a pet shop, they would tell you what, okay? Don't use flash photography and don't touch the glass, right? Don't make noise to spook the animals. This is the number one thing that you shouldn't be doing, aside from feeding them, of course. Okay? But the snake just snoozed on. This is boring, Dudley moaned. He shuffled away. Harry moved in front of the tank and looked intently at the snake. He wouldn't have been surprised if it had died of boredom itself. No company except stupid people drumming their fingers on the glass trying to disturb it all day long. It was worse than having a cupboard as a bedroom, where the only visitor was Aunt Petunia hammering on the door to wake you up. At least he got to visit the rest of the house. So Harry Potter here, okay, the point of him he's talking about this snake quite fondly, right? Because he finds kinship with the snake. He sees himself in the snake. So the snake is locked up in its little pen, right? In its little mini habitat in the zoo, okay? For the purpose of tourists, visitors, okay, zoo goers to look at it. That's it. Okay, it's there for display. Okay, similarly, he's describing it, he's likening it to himself. So it was worse than having a cupboard as a bedroom, where the only visitor was Aunt Petunia. Okay, at least he got to visit the rest of the house. So he's even saying, right, that maybe even he has a better life than the snake, even though he's being neglected and abused in the household. Okay, at least he gets to move around, but the snake is confined to its little area. The snake suddenly opened its beady eyes. Slowly, very slowly, it raised its head until its eyes were on level with Harry's. It winked. Harry stared. Then he looked quickly around to see if anyone was watching. They weren't. He looked back at the snake and winked too. The snake jerked its head toward Uncle Vernon and Dudley, then raised its eyes to the ceiling. It gave Harry a look that said quite plainly, "I get that all the time." Sorry, excuse me. So here, they're actually having a conversation, right? Even though they're not quite saying anything, but Harry's quite sure he understands the look that the snake is giving him. Okay, it looked at Uncle Vernon and Dudley, and then looked up like, "Oh, you have it hard." Okay, so they kind of understand each other. They're having a little bit of an understanding here. Okay, which is quite interesting because most people, I don't know about you, but I'd be very extremely excited to be able to talk to a snake, but I don't think it would understand me in this way. Okay. "I know," Harry murmured through the glass. though he wasn't sure the snake could hear him. It must be really annoying. The snake nodded vigorously. So vigorously is with oomph, okay? Like it's very quickly nodding. Okay? Where do you come from, by the way? Harry asked. The snake jabbed its tail at a little sign next to the glass. Harry peered at it. So a lot of very good words here. Okay? Jabbed, peered. Okay? Instead of simply saying he looked at the sign, he peered at the sign. So he looked quickly. Okay? Jabbed is usually, instead of saying he pointed, okay, that's more gradual. Okay, jabbed is quick and fast. So it jabbed its tail. Okay, we know what a snake's tail roughly looks like, right? So it jabbed its tail at the sign. So it's quick and fast and to show him immediately. Okay, this is where the sign is. Boa constrictor, Brazil. Was it nice there? The boa constrictor jabbed its tail at the sign again, and Harry read on. This specimen was bred in the zoo. Oh, I see. So you've never been to Brazil? As the snake shook its head, a deafening shout behind Harry made both of them jump. Dudley! Mr. Dursley! Come and look at this snake! You won't believe what it's doing! Dudley came waddling towards them as fast as he could. Notice the word they use is waddling. Okay? Usually we'd say a duck waddles or a toddler waddles. Okay, a little bit unstable but very quickly. Usually used to describe things that are sort of roundish or pudgy. Okay, and we know that Dudley is supposed to be on the larger side, right? And he's someone who maybe doesn't move around very quickly. So if he's waddling, it's a means to describe his movement, okay? That he's trying his best to come quickly. Yes. And they also described it as a deafening shout. So it was so loud that it startled both Harry and the snake were startled. Okay, although they were having quite a nice conversation. Also notice the kind of character Harry has. Because as soon as he realized that maybe the snake is trying to communicate with him, he started asking him very nice questions, right? It's not like, wait, can you hear me? You can understand me? Or, prodding questions. No, he asked, was it nice there? Okay, where do you come from? He's trying to make a friend with the snake, which is, I think, a very sweet thing. Okay, so it speaks to his character and what kind of person he is. Versus, for example, Dudley and his friend Pierce. Okay, and this page gives a very good contrast. It shows the contrast between their characters very well. Okay, so out of the way, you, he said, punching Harry in the ribs. Caught by surprise, Harry fell hard on the concrete floor. What came next happened so fast, no one saw how it happened. 1 second, Piers and Dudley were leaning right up close to the glass. The next, they had leapt back with howls of horror. Harry sat up and gasped. The glass front of the boa constrictor's tank had vanished. The great snake was uncoiling itself rapidly, slithering out onto the floor. People throughout the reptile house screamed and started running for the exits. As the snake slid swiftly past him, Harry could have sworn a low, hissing voice said, "Brazil, here I come. Thanks, amigo." The keeper of the reptile house was in shock. "But the glass," he kept saying. "Where did the glass go?" The zoo director himself made Aunt Petunia a cup of strong, sweet tea while he apologized over and over again. Piers and Dudley could only gibber. As far as Harry had seen, the snake hadn't done anything except snap playfully at their heels as it passed. But by the time they were all back in Uncle Vernon's car, Dudley was telling them how it had nearly bitten off his leg, while Piers was swearing it had tried to squeeze them to death. But worst of all, for Harry at least, was Piers calming down enough to say, "Harry was talking to it, weren't you, Harry?" Okay, so a lot of things to unpack here. So let's take a look again. So first, he was having a very nice, calm conversation, making friends with the snake. And the next thing you know, the kids had seen, right? So they came running over, they came rushing over, they were screaming, shouting. And then Dudley was the one who punched Harry in the ribs and got him out of the way so he could see this boa constrictor. Because earlier, we'd already noticed, right? They just wanted to see this vicious creature. They didn't care that they were taking a nap or whatever. They just wanted, they were like, make it move. He told his dad to do that. He told his dad to make it move. Okay, and Uncle Vernon actually tapped on the glass a few times, but that didn't work. Instead, what worked was Harry actually having a conversation with it. Okay, somehow. We don't know how he could do that, but he did. Okay, and then the snake even paused to say thanks, amigo. Okay, to say thanks, friend, to Harry on the way out. Okay, after probably having one of the only nice conversations he could ever have in that zoo, likely. Okay, and then the glass disappeared, which is the protective glass between that protects the animal in its habitat, as well as protecting the visitors and humans outside of it, right? So a lot of things that you wouldn't normally happen. Okay, so even the zoo, it was such a wild thing to happen that even the zoo director made Aunt Petunia a cup of tea to calm her down, to calm her nerves. Okay, and here we have established that the snake didn't actually do anything, right? He slithered out, maybe snapped a little bit at their heels, okay, just to playfully, do something before it left. But they obviously took that and ran with it, right? So Dudley and Pierce started making up all these wild lies of things that happened. And then the worst thing was they mentioned Harry. And we already know that the Dursleys, especially the parents, Aunt Petunia and Vernon Dursley, do not like Harry having anything to do with things that are seemingly not normal, right? They want to be normal, but this thing obviously was not normal. And before they even went to the zoo, Vernon Dursley had a very stern talking to, right? He talked to Harry very sternly to say, you better not have any funny business or else, right? Uncle Vernon waited until Pierce was safely out of the house before starting on Harry. He was so angry he could hardly speak. He managed to say, go, cupboard, stay, no meals, before he collapsed into a chair and Aunt Petunia had to run and get him a large brandy. Okay, so a large type of a cup of alcohol that would, in this case, the idea of it is to calm his nerves because he's so angry that he cannot calm down. Harry lay in his dark cupboard much later, wishing he had a watch. He didn't know what time it was, and he couldn't be sure that the Dursleys were asleep yet. Until they were. He couldn't risk sneaking to the kitchen for some food. So, not only did they blame Harry for this thing, okay, they didn't need any other information. They didn't try to ask him what happened, nothing. It was enough for Pierce to say Harry was talking to it, and that's it. He got extremely angry, so angry he couldn't speak, and he ordered Harry to go to his room, which is the cupboard under the stairs, not even a real room, and starved him, basically. Didn't let him eat any meals. I don't know if you are from an Asian family, but you know that that's not something that we do. Okay? So, and all Harry wanted to do was to get some food, but he couldn't yet. He'd lived with the Dursleys almost 10 years. 10 miserable years. As long as he could remember, ever since he'd been a baby, and his parents had died in that car crash. He couldn't remember being in the car when his parents had died. Sometimes, when he strained his memory, during long hours in his cupboard, he came up with a strange vision. A blinding flash of green light, and a burning pain in his forehead. This, he supposed, was the crash, though he couldn't imagine where all the green light had come from. He couldn't remember his parents at all. His aunt and uncle never spoke about them, and of course, he was forbidden to ask questions. There were no photographs of them in the house. So this we already know, right? The mantelpiece only had pictures of Dudley and Mr. and Mrs. Dursley. Okay, nobody else. So not even Harry, not even knowing that they are the direct relatives of Harry, because Aunt Petunia is Harry's mother's sister. Okay, so Harry is their nephew essentially. But again, Aunt Petunia doesn't have any pictures up of her sister even. Okay, so he doesn't actually know what they look like. When he had been younger, Harry had dreamed and dreamed of some unknown relation coming to take him away. but it had never happened. The Dursleys were his only family. Yet sometimes he thought, or maybe hoped, that strangers in the street seemed to know him. Very strange strangers they were, too. A tiny man in a violet top that had bowed to him once while out shopping with Aunt Petunia and Dudley. After asking Harry furiously if he knew the man, Aunt Petunia had rushed them out of the shop without buying anything. A wild-looking old woman, dressed all in green, had waved merrily at him once on the bus. A bald man in a very long purple coat had actually shaken his hand in the street the other day and then walked away without a word. The weirdest thing about all these people was that the way they seemed to vanish the second Harry tried to get a closer look. At school, Harry had no one. Everybody knew that Dudley's gang hated that odd Harry Potter in his baggy old clothes and broken glasses, and nobody liked to disagree with Dudley's gang. Okay, so many things happen in this chapter, right? So we know that Harry kind of went to the zoo for the first time, but a lot of little things had transpired, okay, around the course of Dudley's birthday, okay? And we know even more so at the end of this paragraph that it's very apparent, okay? Harry knows that he's unwanted and he's neglected in the house. He doesn't like being there. He doesn't feel loved. He wants people. He even wishes that a stranger would take him away, right? He's even considering this. He says he's dreamed of unknown relations coming to take him away. So maybe like a long-lost brother or a cousin twice removed. He wants somebody to be able to remove him from this miserable existence, because he's described it as that, right? He has lived with them for almost 10 miserable years. Again, he's never felt happy there. And then it comes back to this, right? At school, Harry had no one. So again, we learned quite a lot about Harry's character. Okay, even through all this, he's still someone who wants to make a friend, even if it's with a snake. Okay, and that while all this is happening to him, he doesn't actually retaliate in any way. He doesn't fight back, even when Uncle Vernon was wrongly accusing him of this thing. He just went to his room. He's very defeated. He's not trying to fight back. Okay, so many things here. Okay, we don't have too much time left, maybe like 20 minutes, but we will still continue into the next chapter because I will continue this book again next week. Not to worry, okay? So, okay. Lovable Trio, welcome to the live. Marcus, Yuan Mei, Omeyu, sorry, Sandy Matcha, Shana? Is that how you pronounce it? But thank you for joining the live. Okay, my name is Teacher Judith, and we are going through Chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Okay, so I didn't bring a lot of attention to the illustrations in each chapter so far, but maybe I should. Hold on, let's put it up. See, the first chapter talked about the little baby in the bundle, which is the central theme. Okay. Second, no, where is chapter 2? I am maybe blind. Oh, no. Where is chapter 2? Here? Yes, chapter 2, the vanishing glass. Right, and then we have a kid here with presents, which at the end of chapter 2, we realize is actually Dudley. So this is Dudley with his blonde hair. He's quite chubby and he's got a mountain of presents. Okay, so now we're in chapter 3. So before we even get into it, okay, there's the imagery here of, this is the mantle that I was talking about earlier. Okay, this is the mantelpiece. This is the fireplace in the house, in this traditional 90s home. Okay, with a couple of pictures. This is Dudley and the rest of the Dursley family. Okay, this is the mantelpiece. Mantelpiece. Okay, and what do you think this is? Okay, a lot of things coming out of the fireplace, okay, that look like maybe letters, okay, because the title of this chapter is The Letters from No One. So something to just keep in mind as we're going through this. Okay. The escape of the Brazilian boa constrictor earned Harry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of his cupboard again, the summer holidays had started, and Dudley had already broken his new video camera, crashed his remote control airplane, and, first time out of his racing bike, knocked down old Mrs. Fig as she crossed Privet Drive on her crutches. So in the previous chapter, my bad. Okay, in the previous chapter, we knew that Mrs. Fig had broken her leg, and that's why she couldn't babysit or take care of Harry, and that's why Harry ended up going to the zoo for Dudley's birthday. Okay, or joining them at the zoo on his birthday. So many things here, okay? And Dudley has gotten 39-ish presents, right? And he's already broken quite a few of them, okay? So many things here, while Dudley has this ability, this autonomy to be frolicking about with all his gifts and breaking them and having no consequences of them. Harry, however, has spent an entire summer within the confines of a cupboard. So imagine if your room, okay, doesn't have a lot of space, right? And we've all been through lockdown before. So imagine having all of that, but instead, Harry is within the confines of a tiny cupboard. Okay? I don't know how big your storeroom at home is, but just imagine that that's as big as the space that he's got. Okay? Can't quite move around. So Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Piers, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid, but as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them were all quite happy to join in Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunting. Okay? So they all basically come over to bully Harry together. Even though Dudley has 39 presents and what was 16 of them were different video games, they've chosen instead to spend their time on Harry. So that tells us a lot about what Dudley actually likes to do. Okay? This was why Harry spent as much time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he would be going off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. Dudley had been accepted at Uncle Vernon's old private school, Smeltings. Piers Polkiss was going there too. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local public school. Dudley thought this was very funny. They stuffed people's heads down the toilet the first day at Stonewall, he told Harry. Want to come upstairs and practice? Okay, so he's already telling him that you're going to get bullied, so just get used to it. Maybe I can help you get used to it, right? It's quite terrible. Also, in the UK, when they are suggesting public school versus private school, so here in Singapore, basically all schools have uniforms, right? But in the UK, not quite. I'm not sure all of them do. Also in the US, definitely not. So public high schools, like in the UK, usually don't have like a uniform and things like that. But the private schools do. So it shows a difference in class and prestige, okay? So people who go to private school, pay more money, they have more of a status, okay? Hierarchy, if you will. But Harry is just going to a public school. So although on Harry's part, he's quite happy to be away from Dudley, right? But Dudley at the moment is saying that, oh, you're still beneath me for not going to the same school. Okay? No thanks, said Harry. The poor toilets never had anything as horrible as your head down it. It might be sick. Then he ran before Dudley could work out what he'd said. So you already know that Dudley's a bit on the slower side. So Harry made a quick jab. He said what he needed to say and then he ran for it. Okay? One day in July, Aunt Petunia took Dudley to London to buy his Smeltings uniform, leaving Harry and Mrs. Fig's. Mrs. Fig wasn't as bad as usual. It turned out she'd broken her leg tripping over one of her cats, and she didn't seem quite as fond of them as before. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate cake that tasted as though she'd had it for several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smelting's boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and flat straw hats called boaters. They also carried knobbly sticks used for hitting each other while the teachers weren't looking. This was supposed to be good training for later life. As he looked at Dudley in his new knickerbockers, Uncle Vernon said gruffly that it was the proudest moment of his life. Aunt Petunia burst into tears and said he couldn't believe it was his ickle Duddykins. He looked so handsome and grown up. Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He thought 2 of his ribs might already have cracked from trying not to laugh. So Harry is having the time of his life, okay? He's like, okay, this guy is full of himself, okay? The parents are so happy with it, great. But he looks like a fool, okay? He thinks that Dudley looks very funny in his private school uniform. Okay, so he's quite happy to not be wearing those. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went in for breakfast. It seemed to be coming from a large metal tub in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rags swimming in grey water. "What's this?" he asked Aunt Petunia. Her lips tightened, as they always did if he dared to ask a question. "Your new school uniform," she said. He looked at the bowl again. "Oh," he said. "I didn't realize he had to be so wet." "Don't be stupid," snapped Aunt Petunia. "I'm dyeing some of Dudley's old things grey for you. It'll look just like everyone else's when I'm finished." Harry seriously doubted this, but thought it best not to argue. He sat down at the table and tried not to think about how he was going to look on his first day at Stonewall High, like he was wearing bits of old elephant skin, probably. Okay, bits of old elephant skin, because we know that elephants are very large, right? Okay, and that because he is very small, very scrawny, okay, and that in comparison to him, Dudley is much larger. Okay, so he's likening these bits of fabric that are being dyed grey, which is typically what an elephant's skin color looks like, right? So he's saying that he's going to look like he's wearing elephant skin. Okay, and we also know this within the same page, it was the difference in how they treated each boy, right? So for Harry, they're dyeing old clothes to make it seem maybe similar to the things that the kids wear there, versus Dudley, who was parading around the living room showing off his new uniform. Okay, it had a hat, some fancy trousers, a jacket. It was maroon in color, so many colorful things, very prestigious, very ironed flat. Okay, but meanwhile, okay, this gross looking grey pile of something in the sink was meant for Harry. Okay, so again, take into account, okay, all these things add up to the context. Okay, again, adds to the tension between all the characters in the story and how they relate to each other. Okay. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in, both with wrinkled noses because of the smell from Harry's new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper as usual, and Dudley banged his smelting stick, which he carried everywhere, on the table. They heard the click of the mail slot and flop of letters on the doormat. "Get the mail, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the mail, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley." Harry dodged the smelting stick and went to get the mail. So again, this shows the power dynamic between all of them. Okay, Uncle Vernon was completely okay with being ordered around by Dudley, okay, by saying, okay, ask Harry to get it. He's like, yeah, sure, makes sense. And then he even told Dudley, okay, maybe you should poke him with the stick. Okay, nobody poke anybody with a stick. Okay, it's a very rude thing to do. Harry dodged the smelting stick and went to get the mail. 3 things lay on the doormat. A postcard from Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, who was vacationing on the Isle of Wight, a brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his heart twanging like a giant elastic band. So again, good analogy here to use. Okay, we know that elastic bands, when you stretch them, okay, they snap back, right? So that usually has a lot of tension, it shows a jolt, right? It's a quick thing. It's not something gradual. Okay? So twanging like a giant elastic bang suggests that he was jolted with this emotion, right? Shocked by it. Like, oh, hold on, I have mail. That's amazing. Okay? So no one ever in his whole life had written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't belong to the library, so he never even got rude notes asking for books back. So this is another thing that talks about his motivations and things that he wants, but he even wouldn't mind getting those late fee letters from the library if it meant that he got a letter from somebody, okay? Because that's how alone he feels. Yet here it was, a letter addressed so plainly there could be no mistake. Mr. H. Potter, The Cupboard Under the Stairs, number 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. So anybody knows that if you're getting a letter, it has to have a stamp, right? Especially in a place as big as the UK, there's no way, okay? You cannot get letters without stamps. So how did they get in the mailbox, if that's the case? Okay, number 2, it says, Harry Potter, The Cupboard Under the Stairs. Do you think anybody else outside of this family knows that Harry lives in the cupboard under the stairs? Quite interesting. Okay, something to take note of. Oh, I went too far. Okay, page 40. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. Hurry up, boy, shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. What are you doing checking for letter bombs? He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back to the kitchen, still staring at his letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill and the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. Marge is ill, he informed Aunt Petunia. Ate a funny whelk. Dad, said Dudley suddenly. Dad, Harry's got something. Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter, which was written on the same heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. That's mine, said Harry, trying to snatch it back. Who'd be writing to you? Sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green faster than a set of traffic lights. And it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was the greyish white of old porridge. So many things here. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, he snorted in disgust. He sneered. Okay, another way to say that the words he even said, okay, who'd be writing to you? So he knows very well that Harry doesn't have anybody else, okay? So he sneered at him like, are you crazy? What's going on? Okay, don't lie to me so early in the morning, okay? Shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. And then this is where he's experiencing many emotions, okay? Went from red to green. Typically when we use that your face has gone red or purple is because he's so angry, right? Or we can also use red as an imagery for if he's blushing, but this wouldn't be the correct context for it. So he's angry, then to green, because usually we say your face is green or pallid, you're feeling sick, right? Disgusted, okay? Faster than a set of traffic lights. So we know traffic lights change quite quickly, so it's quite funny that they've used that. And it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was the greyish white of old porridge. So typically if a face is very pale, you're terrified, right? Or something's dawned on you, you're shocked to the core. You're like, okay, this is exactly what I didn't want happen, okay? So we can suggest that here, he has dreaded this, okay? He's feeling dread, fear, abject fear, okay, all these things. Petunia, he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach. Aunt Petunia took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment, it looked as though she might faint. She clutched her throat and made a choking noise. Vernon! Oh my goodness, Vernon! They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his smelting stick. I want to read that letter, he said loudly. So now, this is a very good means to show suspense, okay? So many things that they've used. They are obviously not happy about this letter, okay? All these things. Not happy about this letter at all. They don't want Harry to be receiving this letter. And they've made it such that even Dudley wants to know what's going on, okay? So he clutched her throat and made a choking noise. She's so shocked that she cannot even believe what's going on. Okay, so a lot of good language, a lot of things. We've covered many, many things today. We've gotten through at least 20 pages. I believe I started on page 20 or 21. But it is 1 o'clock, so we will be ending the live in a minute. So I just want to say thank you for everybody who's joined us so far. Okay, I will be continuing the books next week, so please give us a follow and like the live. And yeah, I've been Teacher Judith, so we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.